So I'm curious, like, what can China do about this? Because, like, I know with their food shortage, they're hoarding most of the world's grain. When they completely overfished their oceans, they went abroad and overfished other people's oceans. Like, is this going to be a situation where they're like taking water from just other parts of the world? That doesn't seem realistic.
I think this is like the North-South Water Project problem. It's not really that easy you can't easily get like a water pipeline from Russia or something like that.
Or can you?
So, these are actually good questions. I think the answers are several fold. In some cases, of course, they can try to dam up and divert water from these international rivers, right? Like the Mekong, most of which start up in the Himalayas and then flow through the Southwest, Kunming and that region, and then out into South Asia or Southeast Asia. They can potentially try to tap those rivers more and divert them, right? Which wouldn't make them a lot of friends in the region, but would potentially help address some of those needs. Other strategies include outsourcing, what's sometimes called embodied water, right? So instead of making something at home with your own water, you buy the product from someone else, you import it, and you make them use their water, right? And China does a lot of this by exporting its agricultural capacity, right? So by importing, say, animal feed, right, it means they are then relying on Brazil's water or the US's water to produce that animal feed that they then buy, right? Or just the actual food itself, right? Produce or anything else, right? Meat, right? Even meat, has a major water cost, right? How much water went into the, did the cows drink, right? Or went into the production of the food that the cows ate, right? These are not trivial issues. And China has done a lot of that, actually, and they lease agricultural land in other countries like Russia, places in Africa, places in the US. I mean, you name it, actually. That is an explicit strategy. Now, of course, it cuts both ways because you may then reduce your demand for water at home, but you're then increasing your dependence on these agricultural products and their importation, right? So, you still are dependent on something somewhere, but it is one way to manage the water crisis, right? Is to then, offshore those forms of productions that are water intensive.
Yeah, I understand that California exports a lot of alfalfa to China, which is great because California doesn't have any water shortages.
Exactly. Well, that I caught the sarcasm there, and it was very well placed. And yes, the California water crisis is a linked topic that is also worthy of a podcast. U.S. has plenty of its own issues, California, Texas, and elsewhere. So China is far from alone, but the scale and urgency is unmatched by most places. So that's why it's such an issue for China. And frankly, for the rest of the world, right? The converse of China buying its products from the rest of the world that embody water is, of course, the rest of the world is dependent on Chinese manufacturing and production, which uses Chinese water. So the China water crisis becomes everyone's water crisis, right? Through the supply chain connections.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand that like they could alleviate some of the agricultural pressure on water, but if they start to try to export that manufacturing, like that basically means they're not as valuable. Like their economy is built around like this type of like manufacturing. So is that a possibility for them to let some of that go to other places, or do they have to restructure how they manage the economy basically?
100%. So, I think it's a multi-pronged strategy, right? China has many reasons for needing to diversify its economy, And the natural resource demands of the manufacturing oriented economy is only one of them, right? And they have, it seemed like at the beginning of President Xi's tenure that they were committed to that kind of structural reform, and we've seen over time that it hasn't really happened, right? Because it's hard. And it's politically difficult. It's economically difficult. It's difficult with the political system that China has to have a consumer-oriented economy, and it also is just something that takes a long time. So in the meantime, while they're trying to diversify the economy, they need to employ conservation. And so there's the smart way to do it, which is to, do more with less, right? You build facilities that are optimized for efficiency. And then there are the hard ways to do it, which is where you start cutting people off and rationing. And unfortunately, cutting people off and rationing is often the only thing that works in the short term. And so if the onset of the problem comes faster than the solutions, then it's going to be really painful. And there's going to be a lot of that sort of crisis management mentality to address it.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably going to be especially bad now because it seems the indications from like the policy speeches and things that are coming out of the Communist Party in the wake of zero COVID, they're cutting back on a lot of things that they said that they were going to do. And it seems to be that they're having money issues because of how badly the economy did in the last 3 years. So I imagine that that's only going to have a huge impact on how much they're able to do to handle something like a water crisis too.
Undoubtedly. There are a lot of, economic headwinds in China right now, right? There's sort of the recovery from the zero COVID policy. As you said, there's the slow motion, real estate bubble deflating. You have, huge amounts of debt, public and private in China. So, there are a lot of issues that, frankly, many of those plague the West as well, right? You have the demographic crisis. Now the China's workforce is shrinking. Its population may begin shrinking as early as this year. And so these are major structural issues that create headwinds for investing in, the 21st century economy. And these are hard problems.
Yeah. Now, BlackRock has recently suggested that we triple our investments in China. Would you say that's enough, or should we really quadruple them?
Well, it depends how much money you've got. I'd say quintuple them, right? If you're rolling in cash,
especially if you're rolling in other people's cash.
If you're rolling in
like
other people's,
BlackRock,
that's the best money to spend. Yeah. Open the spigots.
Amen. Because there's not water coming out of those spigots anytime soon. So, I mean, obviously, I think it's pretty clear that, if China's manufacturing collapses, the impact that would have globally. But what are some other ways that China's water crisis will impact the globe?
So, I think some of the disruptions that we've seen in trade and supply chains, you have the trade war that Trump started, you have COVID, you have the Russia-Ukraine crisis, you have political tensions over Taiwan and other issues. All of these have kind of put kinks in global supply chains, right? And led to disruptions and shortages and things like that. And I think that these natural resource problems that will periodically constrain or even cripple parts of industry are a sign that these supply chain issues and, frankly, inflation issues as well are not going to go away. They're likely to persist and in many cases even get worse, right? So I think we are just in a new world where, the blue skies sort of just-in-time delivery of anything you've ordered is perhaps a thing of the past, right? Because there are so many of these crises lurking, many of them interrelated. So I think that's a challenge. There's also been a lot of speculation about the political blowback of this kind of a crisis, right? Some people have speculated that, if these natural resource crises become economic crises, that there's always sort of the oldest play in the politician's playbook is jingoism, right? And then you kind of turn to nationalism and kind of foreign military adventures and things like that. So I think there is some speculation and fear that if these issues cause instability or discord at home, that then may then be sort of reflected and magnified on the international stage. That's, of course, speculative, but problems at home do sometimes lead to those kinds of problems being outsourced abroad, right, politically. And so those are something to look out for as well.
So maybe it'll give China finally an excuse to invade Russia.
Well, it's funny, people talk about that because there's a lot of farmland in Russia, right? And China actually already leases a lot of farmland in Western Siberia, where there is a lot of water, a lot of land, and not a lot of people. And so there are very serious thinkers who actually believe that may happen.
Did you know Siberia has been part of China since ancient times?
Yeah, well, China also gets a lot of its grain from Ukraine. So if Russia completes its invasion of Ukraine and then China takes over Russia, it'll by extension get Ukraine. So then problems will be solved. It's actually maybe a much better military investment than taking over a small rock in the South China Sea like Taiwan.
It might be a little harder to take over Russia. I don't know.
I mean, a wise man once said, never start a land war in Asia.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this is above my pay grade, right? But interesting food for thought.
Definitely.
Well irrigated food for thought.
There you go.
Hopefully we can also have some water for thought with that food for thought.
Well, without the water, you're not going to have the food.
That's true. That's true. Something for thought.
Speaking of water, I'm empty here. Could you guys fill me up?
I know. I've been drinking more water this whole podcast.
just in case we run out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I feel a little guilty with my constant sous videing and watering my enormous lawn and all the shot glasses of water I pour out for my homies. Seems like a waste.
And also, of course, the slip and slide.
That's necessary.
Well, I think if you invest in slip and slides, that's the takeaway, right? Is invest in slip and slides produced in other countries, right? That's where the BlackRock dollars should be going.
Good point. Or maybe some kind of Jello-based slip and slide.
Still needs water.
Still needs water. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today. This was very interesting to hear about just more of the ways we're all very, very screwed.
Well, I work on climate change for my day job. So, grappling with that problem is what happens every day when I get out of bed. So,
but I heard on the internet that climate change is a myth.
Well, okay. We're done here.
Okay. It was just getting
your
good.
Favorite myth signing off.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.